My name is Kris Levin, and I work within the professional wrestling industry. There's a saying in professional wrestling about why people get into it, and that's not that you chose to be in it. It's that you didn't have a choice, that you had to be in it. And I guess that would be why I got into professional wrestling. I first started in the pro wrestling business when I was 15 years old. I was just the world's biggest pro wrestling fan, and my mom had saw a sign by the local bank for an independent show. So I went and saw the show, and it was an extraordinary experience. And right after I went home, and I went across their MySpace page. That was back in 2007, and I was just reading through all of their posts, looking at the results, their history, and just trying to find as much information as I could about it. And I stumbled across a post that was advertising for I don't think it was ring crew, but it was just street crew. That's what it was, a street team to help put the flyers out, sweep up around the ring. And I just consumed anything pro wrestling back then, whether it was books or interviews, matches, shows. And I was like, everyone has their story of how they got in. I was like, oh, this is it. This is my entryway to get into this business. I got into booking because, first I probably should explain what booking is for people who don't know, right? Mm-hmm. In pro wrestling, a booker is the person who orchestrates the stories and puts them together. They're the storyteller. They craft the event. And storytelling was something I've always been passionate about, whether it was writing or filmmaking. And pro wrestling is really the art medium that I'm most passionate about, so it was a natural progression. I first decided to look into promoting an all-women's event when I had been working as a referee and other odd jobs within the professional wrestling business for, I think it was 7 years at that point, and I worked for several all-women's companies, and it was just disgraceful the way they were presented and promoted. There was definitely a double standard with how they treated the women versus the men in terms of, let's say it was a high-profile promotion, and only bring in the best male talent. They would let that standard slide depending on how attractive the woman was, and I felt that, the women who took this seriously and the fans, be they man, woman, or child, who took, women's wrestling seriously, or wrestling period, deserve something better. We started looking into where to promote, and we realized that in New York City, in all the entire state of New York, women's wrestling was banned until 1972. And it was unbanned in 72, and from 72 on, in the city of New York, the media capital of the world, there had never been an all-women's pro wrestling event. And it was like, wow, we gotta put it in there. I would definitely say that being a referee has helped me with booking and promoting, because no matter how many books you read, no matter how many talks you have with people to learn, there's never anything as comparable as on-the-job live experience, being in the ring, seeing the interaction between the performers and the crowd, seeing that relationship build, what works and what doesn't, and seeing the stories unfold first person. And in terms of, it definitely helped me, all the experiences have helped me with everything. In terms of promoting has helped me with refereeing, booking has helped me with refereeing. Just, it gave me a wider view of the pro wrestling industry as a whole. And the better you understand something, the better you understand your position, the better you understand the goals that you have in the ring, backstage, and all of that. And it just helps synchronize all of those things to work towards one common goal. Having a daytime job, going to college, and being in the professional wrestling industry, it's a juggling act for sure. The long drives, even as a referee, the physical tolls. I'm meek. I have a bird skeleton, so any little bumps and bruises affect me deeply, and it's a tough thing. But if you want something, you go out and do it. You make it work no matter what. So I just make it work. You schedule your time and figure it out. The biggest difficulties I've had in pro wrestling would definitely be my genetics. I'm 5'8". When I started in pro wrestling, I was 120 pounds. Now I've upped the scales to a whopping 145 pounds. And of course, I have a terrible case of baby face. Right now, maybe I look like I'm 16. When I first started, I looked like I was about 10, if I was lucky, like on a good night. So because of those two things, in a world that has, a lot of machismo and aggression and alpha males everywhere looking for someone to bully, looking for, it's a fake sport, so looking for someone to make them feel bigger. Like I was definitely a prime target for bullying and just like low man on the totem pole. As not only as all that, but as a referee too. They want to look for someone to feel bigger than. But over the years, I shed my shyness. I came into my own. I learned how to speak up for myself, and of course I started to get respect for my abilities in the ring and my knowledge and all of that. So it's starting to balance out a bit. I've had the fortune to have a lot of the highlights of my entire life come from pro wrestling. Meeting my best friends in the world. No one understands me like the people in pro wrestling. Being able to travel the world and see the sights from as far north as Massachusetts and Michigan, as far south as Florida, as far west as Las Vegas and Oregon, and doing that with some of the best friends you could ever hope to find. Just all these exciting adventures. I wouldn't trade that for the world. And pro wrestling as a whole, it brought me out of my shell. It made me comfortable. It made me find who I was and then be comfortable with who I was. And of course, best of all, it introduced me to my best friend, the love of my life. My ultimate goal for myself in pro wrestling, I guess any way that I could leave the professional wrestling industry someday better than it was when I first entered. A lot of people are selfish and takers, and it's just like, what can they get from pro wrestling? And I mean, I don't want to come off like holier than thou or anything, because I'm not. Because I've benefited a lot from pro wrestling, but I really love the art, the business, and the culture of pro wrestling, and I want to see it continue to flourish. Especially women's pro wrestling. I feel like that it's starting to get a bit of a rise in the mainstream culture in terms of how it's represented, how it's presented, and the general feeling of it. But it's not there yet, especially on the independent scene. Usually, the independent scene is sort of the trendsetter for that, but in this case, it started to be. Then the mainstream took it over, and now the independent scene is really falling behind, I feel. And to see women be treated seriously, not just in the ring, but even before that, when they go to training schools, and so often it's she's a woman, she looks great, she doesn't need to learn as well as the men, and that drives me nuts. It's just such a act of sexism, and I really can't stand that. I want to see that abolished. My advice to anyone who has a dream, which everyone has a dream, is don't give up. Just keep on keeping on. No matter what it is. If you want to write, don't obsess over how do I write or where do I learn. Just keep writing. If you want to get into wrestling, find the best school. Don't just settle for something. Never settle. Find the best thing that you can be doing to advance yourself, and then do that and stick to it. My name is Kris Levin, and this has been my experience.